It was a cold Tuesday evening, the kind of night when the rain doesn't pour but lingers, soft, steady, and endless. Officer Daniel Reeves sat in his patrol car outside a small diner, finishing his last cup of lukewarm coffee before heading back to the station. It had been a quiet shift, which was rare in his line of work. The radio hummed softly in the background, playing some old tune that matched the weather, slow and tired. Just as Daniel reached for the ignition, the radio crackled to life. Unit 12. We've got a report of possible abandoned children on Old Mill Road. Neighbors heard crying. Can you check it out? Daniel let out a slow sigh. Old Mill Road. That street had a reputation. Half the houses were falling apart, and the rest were barely standing. Still, he answered without hesitation. Copy that. On my way. He switched on his headlights and pulled onto the slick road, the windshield wipers moving in a tired rhythm. The rain blurred everything outside, turning streetlights into smudges of yellow and orange. As he drove, Daniel couldn't help thinking about how many times he had responded to calls like this. Sometimes it was nothing, a misunderstanding, a family argument, kids playing too loud. But sometimes it was worse. Those were the calls that stayed with him long after his shift ended. When he reached Old Mill Road, the houses looked even sadder than he remembered. One had a broken porch swing that moved slightly in the wind, creaking like an old hinge. Another had its windows boarded up with uneven planks. Then he saw the house, small, dark, and quiet, except for the faint sound of a dog barking somewhere in the distance. The front door was slightly open, swinging back and forth with every gust of wind. Daniel parked, grabbed his flashlight, and stepped out. The air was damp and cold. The moment he pushed the door open wider, a strong smell of mildew and something else, something like spoiled food, hit him. He called out, "Hello, this is the police. Anyone home?" No answer, just silence. He took another step inside. The floor creaked beneath his boots. His flashlight moved slowly across the room, empty soda cans, piles of clothes, and a small couch with a blanket thrown over it. It looked like people had been living here, but not comfortably. Then he heard it, a small sound like a whimper. Daniel froze and listened again. The sound came from the back of the house. He followed it, careful not to startle whoever was there. When he reached the narrow hallway, he called out again, softer this time. "Hey, it's okay. I'm here to help." Still no answer, but the sound grew clearer. Definitely crying now. He opened the last door at the end of the hall, and his flashlight beam landed on something that made his heart sink. 3 children. They were sitting on the floor, wrapped together under a thin, torn blanket. The smallest, a boy with messy blonde hair and wide blue eyes, was holding 2 others close. Twins, from the look of them, maybe 5 years old, their small faces streaked with tears. Daniel lowered his flashlight immediately so he wouldn't scare them. "Hey there," he said gently. "You're safe now. My name's Daniel. I'm a police officer. Can you tell me your names?" The blonde boy looked at him but didn't speak. He just held the twins tighter. One of them, a girl, whispered something into the boy's ear, but Daniel couldn't hear what it was. He knelt down slowly, trying not to seem threatening. "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you. Are you hungry? Do you want some food?" That got a reaction. The boy's lips moved slightly, and after a moment he said in a small, shaky voice, "We ran out of cereal." Daniel nodded softly. "Okay. I'll make sure you get something to eat. Where's your mom or dad, buddy?" The boy's eyes filled with tears again. She said she'd be back, she promised. "How long ago was that?" He shrugged. "I don't know. A lot of nights." Daniel looked around. There was an empty cereal box on the floor, a few bottles of water, and a pile of blankets. These kids had been fending for themselves. He took a deep breath, forcing down the lump in his throat. "All right, let's get you out of here, okay? It's too cold for you to stay." The girl twin hesitated, whispering, "Are we in trouble?" Daniel shook his head. "No, sweetheart, you're not in trouble at all. It took some gentle coaxing, but finally the children stood up. The boy, who Daniel guessed was about 6, took one twin's hand while Daniel carefully picked up the other, who seemed too tired to walk. As they stepped outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Daniel led them to his car, opened the back door, and turned on the heater. The kids sat close together again, shivering a little. "Do you have names?" Daniel asked quietly. The boy hesitated, but finally said, "I'm Liam. This is Ava, and that's Aaron." "Okay, Liam. I'm Daniel. You did a good job taking care of them. You're a brave big brother." Liam looked down at his hands. "They're not really my brother and sister," he said softly. "But we stay together." Daniel didn't push for more. He could ask later once they were warm and safe. He radioed into dispatch. "This is Unit 12. I've got 3 minors, 2 approximately 5 years old, 1 about 6. No adults present. I'm taking them in for temporary care." The drive back to the station was quiet. The rain tapped gently on the car roof, and Daniel glanced at the rearview mirror from time to time. Liam was staring out the window, eyes distant, while the twins had drifted off to sleep, leaning on each other. Something about the scene tugged at Daniel's chest. He'd seen children in bad situations before, but there was something different here. The way Liam held on to the twins, the way they clung to him, it was like they were all each other had left. When they reached the station, Daniel guided them inside. The fluorescent lights were harsh compared to the dim old house. A few officers glanced up from their desks, surprised to see him carrying a sleeping child. "Found them alone," he explained briefly. "No guardian on site." One of the officers nodded and called for child services. Daniel led the kids to the small break room, where he found a box of granola bars and some bottled water. He handed a bar to Liam. "Here, eat something. You'll feel better." Liam took it politely but didn't open it right away. He looked up at Daniel with wide eyes. "Will they take us away?" Daniel crouched down again so they were eye level. "Someone will take care of you for now. Make sure you have food and a warm bed. But I'll be here, okay? You're not alone anymore." Liam didn't say anything, but he finally opened the granola bar and took a small bite. The twins stirred awake, rubbing their eyes. Daniel stayed with them until the social worker arrived. He told himself it was just part of the job, but as the minutes passed, he found himself wishing he could do more. The kids didn't talk much, but their eyes followed him every time he moved. When the social worker entered, a kind-looking woman with a warm smile, Daniel explained what had happened. She nodded, taking notes, and gently introduced herself to the children. But when she tried to lead them toward the door, Liam suddenly gripped Daniel's arm. "Don't go," he whispered. "Please. You said we're not alone." Daniel froze for a moment, feeling the weight of those words. Then he knelt down again. "I'm not going anywhere right now," he said softly. "I'll walk with you, okay?" The boy nodded slowly, finally letting go. As they walked through the hallway, Daniel felt something shift inside him, a quiet, heavy feeling he couldn't quite name. He'd been doing this job for years, but for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like just a cop. He felt like someone who mattered in that moment, someone those kids trusted. After the paperwork was done, and the children were safely placed in temporary care for the night, Daniel sat alone in his car outside the station. The rain had stopped, but the street still shimmered under the streetlights. He thought about the house, the empty cereal box, the blanket that barely covered 3 small bodies. He thought about Liam's voice, small, scared, and trying to sound brave. He didn't know where their mother was or why she had left them behind, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't just file the report and forget about it. As he started the car, he glanced at the small stuffed toy one of the twins had, accidentally left on the back seat, a little gray rabbit with one ear missing. He picked it up and placed it on the dashboard. "Don't worry, kid," he murmured to himself. "We'll figure this out." And as he drove off into the quiet night, Daniel had no idea that this call, the one he thought was just another part of the job, was about to change everything he believed about family kindness and what it really means to protect someone. The next morning, Daniel woke up earlier than usual. He couldn't stop thinking about the 3 children from the night before. He had spent half the night replaying the scene in his mind. The dark house, the shivering kids, the fear in their little faces. It wasn't the first time he had seen something like that, but it had been a long time since it hit him so hard. He made a pot of coffee and stood by the kitchen window, watching the gray sky turn lighter. The city was slowly waking up. Cars, passing, people hurrying down the sidewalks, but all he could think about was Liam, Ava, and Aaron. He wondered if they had eaten breakfast, if they were still scared, and where they would end up next. At the station, his partner, Officer Hall, greeted him with a grin. "You look like you didn't sleep," he said, sipping from his paper cup. Daniel just shrugged. "Didn't feel like sleeping much." Hall raised an eyebrow. "Those kids from last night, right?" "You got soft, man." Daniel gave a half smile. "Maybe. They were so small. You should have seen them. As soon as the doctor clears you, I'll make sure of it." When Daniel left the hospital, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. For the first time that day, he felt a sense of peace. The children weren't abandoned. Their mother hadn't left them. Life had simply hit them harder than most. The next morning, he visited the children again. When he told them that Angela was alive, the reaction was instant. Ava gasped, eyes wide. "She's coming back?" "Yes," Daniel said with a smile. "She's getting better. She asked about you all." Aaron jumped up and down, laughing. "I told you she wouldn't leave." But Liam didn't move at first. He just looked at Daniel carefully as if afraid to believe it. "She's really okay?" "She is," Daniel said. "And she's proud of you. You took care of everyone just like she would have." The boy finally smiled, a small, real smile, and Daniel felt something warm spread through him. As he watched them play again, the sound of laughter filling the small room, Daniel realized how deeply this had affected him. He'd gone into this job to serve and protect, but somewhere along the line the paperwork and procedures had made him forget what that really meant. Now seeing these kids safe and smiling, he remembered. Sometimes being a protector wasn't just about catching criminals or solving cases. Sometimes it was about being there when no one else could be. He looked at the 3 of them and thought quietly, "This isn't over yet." He knew he'd be there when Angela finally came home. A week had passed since the night Daniel found the children, and though things were starting to settle, his mind couldn't rest. Every time he closed his eyes, he could still see their faces, especially Liam's. That little boy had carried a weight far too big for his small shoulders. Angela was still in the hospital, recovering slowly from the accident. She had a broken arm and several bruises, but the doctor said she was healing well. Every day, Daniel checked in with her before or after his shift. It wasn't part of his job anymore, but he didn't care. Something about this family felt different. One morning, he walked into the children's temporary foster home, holding a small bag of cookies and a few crayons he had bought on his way. The twins spotted him first. Ava ran up with a huge grin, waving a piece of paper covered in bright colors. "Look, I made a rainbow," she said proudly. Daniel smiled and crouched down. "That's beautiful. You're quite the artist." Aaron came over too, holding a toy car. "We play racing now. Liam says we're practicing for real cars when we grow up." Daniel chuckled. He's probably right. When he looked up, he saw Liam sitting at the table, coloring quietly. There was something calmer about him now, but still a hint of worry behind his eyes. "Hey, buddy," Daniel said softly as he sat beside him. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," Liam said after a pause. "The lady here is nice. She reads us stories." "That's good," Daniel said. "I've got something to tell you. Your mom's getting better. She's walking now, and she asked about you again today." The boy's eyes lit up instantly. "Really? Can we see her soon?" "Soon," Daniel said. "Maybe this week." Ava overheard and jumped in. "Can we take her flowers?" "She likes the yellow ones," Daniel smiled. "That's a great idea." After spending some time with them, Daniel went back to the station to update the case report. His captain walked by and stopped at his desk. "You're still working that case?" the captain asked. "Just following through," Daniel replied. "Wanted to make sure the mom's okay before closing it." The captain studied him for a second, then nodded. "You always did have a soft spot for the tough ones. Keep me posted." Later that afternoon, Daniel returned to the hospital to check on Angela again. She looked stronger this time, sitting upright and eating a small meal. When she saw him, she smiled warmly. You've been my only visitor, officer, she said softly. You don't have to keep coming, you know. Daniel smiled back. I want to. Besides, your kids keep asking about you. I promised them I'd give you updates. She blinked, holding back tears. Those kids mean everything to me. I was so scared I'd never see them again. Daniel pulled up a chair. Angela, I've been digging a little into your background, trying to make sure everything's okay for when you go home. You've been through a lot. Angela sighed, staring at her hands. I know what people think when they look at me. A single woman with 3 kids who don't look alike. But I don't care what anyone says, they're my family. I promised 2 women I'd love their children like they were my own, and that's what I did. Daniel nodded. You've done more than most would. It's clear how much they love you. She smiled faintly. We didn't have much, but we had each other. I worked 2 jobs, cleaning during the day, diner at night. I used to get home so tired, but when I saw their faces, it was worth it. That night, I was on my way back from my shift. I must have hit black ice. The next thing I knew, I was waking up here. Daniel listened quietly. You've been fighting this whole time, Angela. You did everything right. You didn't abandon them, you got hurt. That's not your fault. Tears filled her eyes again. I just keep thinking about how scared they must have been. I can't imagine what Liam went through trying to take care of the twins. He did an amazing job, Daniel said. He looked after them like a big brother. You should be proud. Angela smiled weakly. He always tries to be strong even when he's scared. He lost his mom so young. I didn't want him to feel like he lost another. Daniel could feel the heaviness in her voice. You didn't, you came back. That evening, he returned home feeling something stir deep inside him. He had seen many families fall apart through the years. Broken homes, lost children, forgotten promises. But this family had held on to each other despite everything. It reminded him of something he hadn't thought about in a long time. His own mother, who raised him alone after his father left. The next day, Daniel met with a social worker to discuss reuniting the children with Angela once she was discharged. The woman smiled. She's been cleared to leave in a few days. We'll schedule a supervised visit first, just to make sure everything goes smoothly. When Daniel brought the news to the kids, they nearly jumped with joy. Can we see her tomorrow? Ava asked, bouncing in excitement. Soon, Daniel said, laughing. They're getting everything ready. Maybe you can make her something to bring. Liam immediately said, I'll draw a picture of all of us together. That's perfect, Daniel said. She'll love that. The next few days felt long. Daniel checked on the progress every morning. When the day of the visit finally came, he drove to the foster home to pick the children up himself. Ava and Aaron were already dressed, holding a bunch of yellow flowers they had picked from the garden outside. Liam clutched his drawing carefully, afraid to wrinkle it. On the drive to the hospital, the car was filled with nervous excitement. Ava kept humming a song under her breath, and Aaron couldn't stop asking, how much longer? When they arrived, Daniel led them down the hallway. Angela was waiting in a small lounge area, standing with her arm still in a sling. When the kids saw her, they froze for just a second. Then all 3 ran to her at once. Mom! They cried together. Angela dropped to her knees, wrapping them all in her good arm as tears streamed down her face. Oh, my babies, she whispered. I missed you so much. Daniel stepped back, letting them have their moment. There was something deeply moving about watching them cling to each other, as if letting go might make the moment disappear. After a while, Liam pulled out the drawing. I made this for you, he said shyly. Angela took it and smiled through her tears. It showed the 4 of them standing in front of a small house with sunshine above it and the words, Our Home, written in big, uneven letters. It's perfect, she said softly. You kept everyone safe, didn't you? Liam nodded. I tried. Daniel stood by the door, feeling a quiet warmth spread through him. It wasn't his family, but it felt personal somehow. Maybe it was because he saw something in them that he'd lost. The strength that comes from love that doesn't quit. After the visit, Angela thanked him again. You didn't just do your job, officer, she said. You gave us our family back. Daniel smiled, shaking his head. You did that yourself. I just helped connect the dots. But the truth was, he felt changed. He'd always thought of his job as something that came with boundaries. You help, you report, you move on. But this time he couldn't move on. Something about these kids and their mother's quiet courage had stirred something real inside him. Later that night, back in his apartment, Daniel looked at the small stuffed rabbit that still sat on his shelf, the one the twins had left behind that first night. He picked it up and smiled. He realized that, without meaning to, he had become a part of their story. He thought about how easily things could have gone differently. If he hadn't taken that call seriously, if he'd arrived just a little later, what would have happened to those 3 children? The thought made his stomach twist. He sat back on his couch, listening to the faint sound of rain outside, and whispered to himself, "Sometimes, the smallest calls make the biggest changes." The next day, Daniel got the final confirmation. Angela was officially cleared to bring the children home. The foster worker told him, "They'll need some support for a while. Maybe some groceries, help setting things up again." "I'll handle that," Daniel said without hesitation. And he did. That evening he stopped by the market and filled a few bags with essentials: bread, milk, cereal, fruits. "Social services picked them up, yeah?" "Yeah," Daniel said quietly. "But I'm going to check in today, just to make sure they're okay." Hall chuckled. "You're turning into a big brother yourself." Daniel didn't answer. He just picked up his folder and left. When he arrived at the social services office, the waiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant and crayons. A few children were sitting with adults, some playing quietly, others fidgeting or staring at the floor. A kind-looking woman at the front desk smiled when she saw him. "You're Officer Reeves, right? From the Old Mill Road case?" "That's right," Daniel said. "I wanted to check on the kids from last night." The woman nodded. "They're with us now in a temporary care room. You can see them if you like, but please keep it short. They're still adjusting." Daniel followed her through a hallway until they reached a small room filled with toys, books, and a colorful rug. When he stepped inside, 3 small heads turned toward him. Liam was sitting on the floor with a toy car, while the twins were coloring on paper with broken crayons. The moment they saw him, Ava dropped her crayon and ran to him. "Officer," she said, her face lighting up. Daniel knelt down to her level, smiling. "Hey there. How are you doing?" "We got pancakes," she said proudly, pointing at the little plate on the table. "That's good," Daniel said softly. "Glad you're getting some real food." Liam stood up, still holding the toy car. "You came back," he said quietly. "I told you I would, didn't I?" The boy gave a small nod, a faint smile on his face. Daniel stayed with them for a while, just talking, listening to the way they described things. The twins told him about the lady who brought them new clothes and about how soft the blankets were. But when the conversation turned to their mother, they all went silent. "Do you know where she went?" Daniel asked gently. Liam hesitated. "She went to work. She always goes to work, but she said she'd be back." "When was the last time you saw her?" He looked at the floor. "I don't know. It was dark outside. Maybe 3 nights or 4? Daniel didn't press further. He could see the confusion in the boy's eyes. The twins looked at Liam as if he always had the answers. But this time he didn't. Before Daniel left, the social worker came back with some papers. "We're still trying to find any relatives or a legal guardian," she explained. "But so far, nothing. We'll keep looking." Daniel thanked her and looked at the kids again. "I'll check in again soon, okay?" Ava tugged on his sleeve. "Can you bring cookies next time?" He smiled. "You got it." Back at the station, Daniel filed his report but couldn't stop thinking about what Liam had said. Their mother went to work. She always came back until now. That meant she hadn't abandoned them. Something must have happened. He pulled up the case file again. The rental house was under the name Angela Porter. No emergency contacts, no family listed. But the neighbors had mentioned seeing her a few times. Always leaving early in the morning, coming back late at night. Working 2 jobs, probably. Daniel decided to visit the neighborhood again. When he reached Old Mill Road, the rain had left the ground muddy. The old house looked even lonelier now, taped off with yellow police tape. A woman in her 50s stood on her porch across the street smoking a cigarette. "Afternoon," Daniel called as he approached. "You live nearby?" She nodded. "Been here 20 years. You're the one who found those kids, right?" "Yes, ma'am." "Do you happen to know the woman who lived there? Angela Porter?" The woman took a long drag and exhaled. "Sweet lady. Worked all the time. Always looked tired. Those kids were everything to her. She'd walk them to the bus stop every morning, even when it rained. Did she ever mention family? Maybe someone who could take care of them?" "No." Said it was just her and the kids. The blonde one wasn't hers, though. Daniel looked at her curiously. You mean Liam? Yeah, that one. She said his mama was her best friend. Died a few years ago. Angela promised to raise him like her own. That piece of information hit Daniel like a quiet shock. The kids weren't all siblings, but they were still family in their own way. Did you see her recently? He asked. The woman frowned. Not for about a week. She usually took the bus from downtown after her shift. I thought maybe she got sick or something. Daniel thanked her and took notes. He decided to check local hospitals next. It took a few calls, but finally one nurse at a hospital 2 towns over said something that made him pause. Yes, we had a woman brought in about a week ago. Car accident. She didn't have any ID on her, but she matches that description. Mid-30s, dark hair, light jacket, about 5'4". Daniel's pulse quickened. Is she still there? She's recovering, the nurse said. Would you like to come by to confirm? He didn't waste a second. When Daniel walked into the hospital room later that afternoon, he found a woman lying in bed with bandages on her forehead and a sling around her arm. She looked pale but awake. When she saw the uniform, her eyes filled with confusion. Ma'am, Daniel said softly, are you Angela Porter? She blinked, then nodded slowly. Yes, what happened? You were in a car accident. You've been here for about a week. You didn't have any ID on you, so no one knew who you were. Angela's face went pale. My kids, she whispered. Where are my kids? Daniel smiled gently. They're safe. I found them. They're okay. Tears filled her eyes instantly. Oh, thank God. I tried to call home after the crash, but my phone, it was gone. I thought, they must have been so scared. They were, Daniel said honestly, but they were brave. The boy Liam, he took care of the twins, kept them together. Angela covered her face with her good hand, shaking with quiet sobs. They're all I have. I promised their mothers I'd protect them. Mothers? Daniel asked softly. She nodded. Ava and Aaron's mom was my sister. She passed last year. Liam's mother was my best friend. She made me promise I'd raise him like my own. I did the best I could. I was just trying to work enough hours to keep the house. Daniel felt a deep ache in his chest as he listened. This woman had been carrying the weight of 3 children all on her own, working herself to exhaustion. You did good, Angela, he said quietly. You kept your promise. She looked up at him through tearful eyes. Can I see them, please? He added a small box of cookies, remembering Ava's earlier request. When he delivered everything to Angela's house later that week, the kids were already running around the small living room, laughing. The sound filled the space that had once been silent and cold. Angela hugged him tightly at the door. You've done more than you know, she said. Daniel smiled. You don't owe me anything. Just promise me one thing. What's that? She asked. Keep that laughter going. Angela smiled, tears in her eyes again. I will. As Daniel walked back to his car, he turned once more to see them standing together in the doorway, waving. The lights from inside spilled onto the porch, warm and golden. He smiled quietly. This wasn't just another case anymore. It was a reminder of why he became a cop in the first place. To protect. Yes, but also to care, and as he drove away, the little rabbit on his dashboard seemed to smile back at him. A few weeks passed, and life slowly started to return to normal for Angela and the kids. The house that had once been dark and silent now echoed with laughter again. The twins' drawings covered the refrigerator door, and Liam spent most of his time helping Angela with small chores or reading stories to the younger ones. Daniel still visited them every few days, sometimes dropping off groceries or small treats. At first, Angela had tried to insist he didn't have to keep helping, but it was clear that he wanted to. And truthfully, the kids looked forward to his visits. Whenever his patrol car pulled up outside, Ava and Aaron would run to the window, shouting his name. That evening, Daniel stopped by after his shift. The smell of dinner filled the air, spaghetti and garlic bread, and the warm glow from the kitchen spilled into the hallway. Angela smiled when she saw him at the door. You're just in time, she said. I hope you're hungry, Daniel laughed. I can't say no to spaghetti. They all sat down together at the small table. The twins talked non-stop about their day at school. Ava proudly explained how she had drawn the best picture in art class, while Aaron said he had learned to count to 100. Liam sat quietly, smiling at their excitement. After dinner, Daniel helped clear the table while Angela tucked the twins into bed. When she came back, she leaned against the counter, letting out a tired sigh. They've been so happy lately, she said softly. I think they finally feel safe again. Daniel nodded. They've got you. That's what matters most. Angela looked at him thoughtfully. You know, I never got to thank you properly. If you hadn't found them that night, I don't even want to think about what could have happened. Daniel smiled faintly. You don't need to thank me. I just did what anyone would have done. She shook her head. No, not everyone would have cared the way you did. You didn't just find them, you stayed. You made sure they were okay. Her words stayed with him long after he left that night. As he drove home, he couldn't help but think about how much that family had changed him. Before all this, his life had been simple. Work, sleep, repeat. He didn't talk to many people outside of the job, and his small apartment always felt too quiet. But now every time he left their house, that silence felt heavier. Over the next few days, Daniel began digging a little deeper into Angela's situation. He wanted to help her get back on her feet. She had missed weeks of work because of her injuries, and though she tried to stay positive, Daniel could see the worry in her eyes. One afternoon, he stopped by the diner where she used to work. The manager, a middle-aged man wiping down tables, looked up when Daniel introduced himself. I'm here about Angela Porter, Daniel said. She's been in recovery after her accident. Oh, Angela, the man said, nodding. Yeah, I heard about that. She's one of the hardest workers I ever had. I told her she could come back whenever she's ready. Daniel smiled. That's good to hear. She's healing well, but I know she's been worried about keeping her job. She doesn't have to worry, the man said kindly. You can tell her we'll hold her spot. We've missed her around here. When Daniel told Angela later that day, she almost cried from relief. I don't know how to thank you, she said quietly. You just did, Daniel said with a grin. From then on, Daniel stopped by less often, wanting to give her space to rebuild her life, but the connection between them didn't fade. Every once in a while, he'd get a call or a message from Angela updating him about something the kids did. One Friday evening, he got a text. You should stop by tomorrow. The kids have a surprise for you. The next day, Daniel drove over curious. When he arrived, the kids were waiting at the door, grinning from ear to ear. Close your eyes, Ava said. Daniel laughed but did as he was told. They led him into the living room where the smell of glue and paint filled the air. Okay, open them, Aaron shouted. Daniel opened his eyes and saw a large piece of cardboard covered in drawings, stickers, and colorful letters. At the top it said, Thank you, Officer Daniel. In the middle were drawings of all 5 of them, Angela, the kids, and him, standing in front of the little house with hearts and sunshine all around. Daniel stared at it for a moment, speechless. You made this? He finally asked. Ava nodded proudly. We all did. Liam drew you with your badge. Liam looked shyly at him. We wanted to say thank you for helping us. Daniel smiled, his throat tight. I think this is the best gift I've ever gotten. Angela stood nearby, smiling warmly. They've been working on it all week. They couldn't wait to show you. Daniel looked at her and said quietly, You're raising some amazing kids. They've taught me more than I've taught them, she said softly. That night, Daniel took the poster home and hung it on his living room wall. For the first time in years, his apartment didn't feel empty. He sat for a while just looking at it, remembering how far they had all come since that cold night on Old Mill Road. But even as things seemed peaceful, Daniel couldn't shake a small worry in the back of his mind. He'd seen families like this before, people doing their best but still struggling because of circumstances beyond their control. Angela had heart and determination, but with 3 young children and only 1 income, life would still be hard. A few days later, he met with a community outreach officer who worked on family support programs. I know a mom who could really use some help, Daniel explained. She's been through a lot, but she's doing everything she can to keep her family together. The officer smiled. We can help with that. There's a program that provides childcare assistance and housing support for families recovering from hardship. Daniel filled out the forms on Angela's behalf and dropped them off at her house later that week. What's this? She asked, confused. It's just some paperwork, Daniel said casually. There's a community program that can help with childcare and bills for a while. You should apply. Angela looked at him, her eyes full of emotion. You've done so much already, Daniel. You don't have to keep helping, he smiled. I know, but I want to. That simple answer seemed to say everything. A few weeks later, the approval came through. Angela called him, her voice trembling with excitement. They accepted us. I can finally work full-time again without worrying about leaving the kids alone. That's amazing, Daniel said, genuinely happy. You deserve it. By now, it wasn't just about duty or kindness, it was something deeper. Daniel had grown attached to them. They had become like family. One Saturday afternoon, Angela invited him and his partner from the station for a small barbecue in the backyard. The kids were running around playing tag, while Daniel stood by the grill flipping burgers. The smell of smoke and laughter filled the air. As the sun began to set, Angela sat beside him at the patio table. You know, she said quietly, before all this happened, I used to think we were just surviving. But now, it feels like we're living again. Daniel looked at her and smiled. That's because you never gave up. She turned her gaze toward the kids who were still laughing and chasing each other. They're the reason I didn't. There was a comfortable silence between them for a moment, the kind that only happens between people who've been through something real together. Later that night, when everyone had gone home, Daniel drove back through the quiet streets, feeling lighter than he had in years. The streetlights glowed softly against the pavement, and he realized something he hadn't before. Sometimes, helping others doesn't just change their lives, it changes yours too. That thought stayed with him as he parked his car and stepped into his apartment. The poster from the kids still hung proudly on his wall. He smiled at it before turning off the lights. He didn't know what the future would bring for Angela and the children, but he was sure of one thing: they would be okay. And somehow, so would he. That night, as he fell asleep, Daniel thought about how strange life could be. One call, one moment, one decision, and everything changes. He closed his eyes, the sound of laughter from earlier still echoing softly in his mind. Months had passed since that long, cold night when Daniel first found the 3 children. So much had changed since then. The small, lonely house on Old Mill Road now looked alive again. The yard was tidy, the porch had a few flower pots, and laughter could often be heard coming from inside. The twins were growing fast, and Liam had started helping Angela with anything she needed. Daniel still dropped by sometimes, though not as often as before. He told himself it was because work had been busy, but deep down he knew it was more than that. He missed them when he didn't see them. He missed the noise, the chaos, and the warmth that house carried. One afternoon, while sitting in his patrol car outside a convenience store, Daniel saw a text come in. It was from Angela. You should come by on Sunday. We have something special planned. He smiled to himself. He had a feeling it wasn't just about lunch. Angela always said the kids loved making surprises. When Sunday came, Daniel arrived a little early. The twins were in the front yard, drawing with colorful chalk on the sidewalk. As soon as they saw him, they shouted and ran toward him. You're here, Ava said, throwing her arms around his leg. Of course, Daniel said, smiling. I wouldn't miss it. Aaron held up his chalk-covered hands proudly. Look, we made a rainbow. Daniel looked down at their art, a huge rainbow across the walkway with all their names written underneath, including his. That's beautiful, he said softly. You even put my name. Ava nodded seriously. Because you're part of the family too. Before Daniel could respond, Angela came out onto the porch, wiping her hands on a towel. You're early, she said with a smile. Good thing the food's almost ready. He followed her inside, where the smell of roasted chicken filled the house. The table was set neatly, and there was a small wrapped box sitting in the center. What's this? He asked. Angela smiled. You'll find out later. During dinner, the kids talked endlessly about school friends and how they wanted to visit the zoo. Daniel listened, laughing now and then, but he couldn't help noticing how peaceful everything felt. The kids had come such a long way from the scared, quiet little ones he had found months ago. They were happy, safe, loved. After they finished eating, Angela nodded to Liam. Go ahead, she said. Liam carefully pushed the small wrapped box toward Daniel. This is from us, he said shyly. Daniel raised an eyebrow. For me? The twins nodded eagerly. Open it! Inside the box was a small wooden keychain, hand-carved and painted. It had 4 small figures, 3 little ones and a taller one, standing together under a roof. On the back in small letters were the words, Thank you for finding us. Daniel stared at it, his throat tightening. Did you make this? Angela smiled softly. Liam worked on it at school. He wanted to give you something to remember us by. Daniel turned it over in his hand. I don't think I could ever forget you, he said quietly. The room fell silent for a moment, the kind of silence that's filled with emotion rather than emptiness. Then the twins started giggling, and just like that, the moment became lighter again. Later that evening, after the kids went to bed, Daniel and Angela sat on the porch with cups of coffee. The air was cool, and the crickets hummed softly in the distance. They've really come a long way, Daniel said. Angela nodded. It still amazes me sometimes. After everything that happened, I didn't think we'd ever feel normal again. But here we are. Daniel looked out at the yard. You did that, you know. You kept them together. You gave them hope. Angela smiled faintly. You helped too, more than you realize. I don't think I could have gotten through those first few weeks without you. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. He just nodded, feeling something deep and unspoken between them. After a while, Angela asked quietly, Do you ever think about that night, when you found them? All the time, Daniel admitted. It changed me. She looked at him curiously. How so? I used to think this job was just about rules and reports, he said slowly. You show up, you fix what you can, you move on. But that night made me realize something. It's about people, about what happens after we leave the scene. I used to keep my distance, but now, I don't think I can anymore. Angela looked at him with understanding. You have a big heart, Daniel. Maybe that's why you were meant to find them. He smiled softly. Maybe. For a long moment, they sat in silence, watching the stars. Then Angela spoke again. I've been thinking a lot about the future, about what's next for us. Daniel turned to her. What do you mean? I got a new job offer, she said. It's at a daycare center in the next town. It pays better and it's during the day, so I'll have more time with the kids. That's great, Daniel said sincerely, though he felt a small tug of sadness. You deserve it, she hesitated. It does mean we might have to move, though. The commute would be too far from here. Daniel nodded slowly. He forced a smile. That's okay. You need what's best for them. I just didn't want you to find out later, she said quietly. You've been part of this from the start. You deserve to know. He appreciated that more than she probably realized. Thank you for telling me, he said softly. And don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. You'll still see me around, she smiled gently. I hope so. When Daniel left that night, he sat in his car for a long time before starting the engine. He looked at the little wooden keychain hanging from his rearview mirror and smiled. Somehow that small piece of wood carried so much meaning. Loss, love, and the unexpected ways people can find each other. Weeks later, Angela and the kids moved to their new place. It wasn't far, just 2 towns over, but it felt different. The kids had a bigger yard, and Angela finally had a stable job with regular hours. Daniel visited when he could, usually on his days off. Each time, the kids ran to greet him like no time had passed at all. They showed him their new rooms, their new school, and even the small garden they were helping their mom grow. One sunny afternoon, as Daniel helped Aaron build a small birdhouse, Liam sat beside him and said, Mom says we're lucky. Daniel smiled. She's right. You are lucky to have her. Liam looked up. She says we're lucky to have you too. Daniel paused, then said quietly, Well, I think I'm the lucky one. That evening as he drove home, Daniel realized how much the whole experience had shaped his life. He had started volunteering as a mentor for children in foster care, helping them adjust to new homes. He even began visiting schools to talk about safety and kindness. Every time he told his story, he thought of those 3 kids, the ones who had reminded him what it meant to care. Months turned into a year, and life moved on, as it always does. But the bond they shared never faded. On birthdays and holidays, Daniel's phone always lit up with pictures and messages from Angela and the kids. Sometimes it was a drawing, sometimes a simple, "We miss you," and every time, he'd smile and write back, "I miss you too." One afternoon, while sitting in his patrol car during a quiet shift, Daniel looked at the keychain again. The paint was chipped now, the wood a little worn, but he wouldn't have traded it for anything. He thought about how strange life was, how a simple call could change everything. He had gone to that old house expecting just another report, another forgotten story. Instead, he'd found something real, a connection, a family, even if it wasn't by blood. He turned on the radio and leaned back in his seat. feeling a quiet sense of peace. Sometimes, he thought, the greatest miracles don't come with flashing lights or grand gestures. Sometimes they come quietly, in the form of 3 small children waiting in the dark, and one man who decided not to walk away. And in that quiet moment, Daniel realized something he hadn't before. He hadn't just saved them that night, they had saved him too.